Joe, have you seen In the Bedroom yet?
No.
But you wrote a cold open for it.
Yes.
How could you write a cold open for a film that you haven't seen?
Good question, George. I figured what I would do is you and I would read real headlines and add in the bedroom to them. For example, Biden meets with G7 leaders in the bedroom.
Really, Joe? What if this was a serious movie? We're going to open the show by doing a series of dumb jokes first? We're going to look like assholes.
George, we've done that for 150 shows. I should also remind you, I work in some office job I don't discuss, and you are a supervisor at a public utility. What the fuck do we know about film, but we run a podcast about movies? We are assholes.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
So let's start. First headline, George.
Okay. China vows more friendly consensus amid Vatican complaints in the bedroom.
My turn. Aaron Rodgers injures ribs and Packers lost to Eagles in the bedroom.
Gavi misses Spain practice at World Cup because of injury in the bedroom.
Noted Russian nationalist says army has too few doctors in the bedroom.
Nicole Kidman surprises Hugh Jackman on stage with massive $100,000 donation in the bedroom.
52 weird Christmas gifts guaranteed to make for a nutty Noel in the bedroom.
Sheriff Alex Villanueva embarrassed himself again in the bedroom.
How, after 20 years of talking, Tony Kushner got Steven Spielberg to open up in the bedroom.
All right, that's enough. Let's start the show.
Start the show in the bedroom. Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romaka. And today we're discussing In the Bedroom from 2001 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com on Facebook or on Letterboxd. And we're also on IMDb now, although all of our episodes aren't.
Yeah, what's that about?
It just takes an annoyingly long time to put them in.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 2001.
For those who don't know, and that would be me before I started on the script, In the Bedroom's title refers to the inner cage of a lobster trap. It is called The Bedroom and is intended only to hold 2 lobsters. With that in mind, what's a related news item from 2001 concerning lobster traps? Here's one, and it's coming to you straight from Maine. Read this headline from the Bangor Daily News, George.
Banger? She and I never even kissed.
Just read the headline.
Assault on couple may be tied to disputes over lobster traps.
Ironically, this story took place in Friendship, Maine. How can you be assaulting people in a place called Friendship? That ain't right. But this is what happened. According to this article, back in 2001, some 70-year-old assaulted a couple in the home of a third man. The assault may be connected to a dispute between lobstermen, fishing territory, and the cutting of lobster traps. All of that is part of a bigger problem beyond the folks in the story. By now, in my writing of this, I had seen our movie, and this quote jumped out at me. Quoting, "The obstacle that law enforcement agencies are running into when they respond to assaults, complaints of trap cutting, and such is a lack of cooperation," Lieutenant Dan Morris, a Marine Patrol spokesman, said Tuesday. The trap cutting, which has escalated over the past year, is done for a variety of reasons, he said. 2 primary motives are the breaking of unwritten lobster fishing rules and, more simply, a general dislike for somebody, he said. End quote. No trap cutting happens in the film, but the characters in this film do have a real hang-up about calling the cops.
How can they hang up if they never placed the call in the first place?
Thank you, George. They don't do it even after a guy gets punched out. It's weird. Are there no Karens in this town, or is it because they're all white that they refuse to bring in law enforcement? George, what was that all about?
It's a good question, Joe, because I comment on that in the script too.
Okay.
Like, they're all white. Why are they so fucking afraid of calling the cops?
Next story, in 1997, a doctor in Maine was shot to death. They arrested his wife for the murder, but she was acquitted. In 2001, the woman committed suicide. This story also comes to us from the Bangor Daily News. Headline, George.
Former murder suspect left note. Police. Malmstrom claimed innocence.
Maine resident Geraldine Malmstrom was a nurse, a mother of 3, and a wife to neurologist Dr. John Malmstrom. One day, in their garage, Dr. Malmstrom was shot 4 times. 2 years later, Geraldine would be arrested for his murder. The police had no motive, but her alibi wasn't strong. Plus, the murder weapon, found 4 months after the shooting, was thought to belong to her. None of that was good enough for a jury. She would go on to be acquitted. During the murder investigation, she left town with her kids, but obviously didn't escape her nightmares and killed herself while living in Texas. In the suicide note, she proclaimed her innocence, like the headline says. I have no idea if this woman actually murdered her husband or if she was hounded to her death thanks to bad police work and inept prosecution. In our movie, we know who the murderer is. In real life, it's not so cut and dry. Can you imagine, George, being a suspect to the death of someone? Do you think you could handle something like that?
I think it depends on the who. If it's somebody I really cared about, and I can't prove that I didn't do it, that might fuck with me. If there's somebody I didn't care about, or somebody I loathed, might be easier.
Fair enough. Okay, George, tell us about In the Bedroom.
All right, I will overshare.
Huh? Oh, I see. I didn't even get the joke, even though that was our cold open.
So this was written and directed by Todd Field.
As we take a look at this film, Todd Field has a movie out in the theaters. His latest is about a famous female classical music conductor who is a sexual predator on other women. I have not seen it. I have no intention in doing so. There's a trend I have with all this man's work. The stuff he makes cinema about is stuff that does not interest me in seeing.
And according to IMDb, this is the highest grossing non-IMAX film in history to never reach the top 10 in a given week.
Yeah, the film made good box office. I just didn't have any interest in seeing it, and evidently neither did you.
So it's based on the story Killings by Andre Dubois, and that title makes a lot more sense. And the screenplay is by Robert Festinger. Festinger? I haven't even kissed her yet.
Hey, you. I'm afraid I've never read any Andre Dubois stories, nor have I seen any film from a screenplay by Robert Festinger outside of the one we are here to discuss.
So for awards, this was nominated for the following Oscars. Best Actor in a Leading Role for Tom Wilkinson, Best Actress in a Leading Role for Sissy Spacek, Best Actress in a Supporting Role for Marissa Tomei, who has aged well and Joe has aged better than. I just wanted to put that out.
I would not go that far. I mean, she's aged fantastic.
She has. So have you, Joe. Best Writing, Screenplay based on material previously produced or published. That's alliterative.
Mm-hmm.
And it won a Golden Globe for Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture Drama for Sissy Spacek, and was nominated for Golden Globes for Best Motion Picture Drama and Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role in a Motion Picture for Marissa Tomei.
Do you know about the controversy about Marissa Tomei?
I have no idea.
Okay. For some reason, let me rephrase that. She won an Oscar for My Uncle Vinny or something. I never saw the movie.
My Cousin Vinny?
My Cousin Vinny. And for some reason, people decided that it was a mistake, that the award people read the wrong name, and so she wasn't deserving of the award. And I don't know why that rumor started. It's absolutely absurd and insult to her. But we see, look, she keeps getting work, and she got nominated for this. So clearly, she is a good actress. I don't know why people would say those things about it. It was bizarre.
Yeah.
There's nothing controversial about it. I don't know why they picked her out of all the people to suddenly talk shit about.
So, for the blurbs, I'm just going to read them first before we comment.
Okay.
IMDb says, a New England couple's college-aged son dates an older woman who has 2 small children and an unwelcome ex-husband. And then Amazon says, the Fowlers are a typical family. Matt is a doctor, and his wife, Ruth, is the school's choir leader. Their son, Frank, is home from college and in love with Natalie, a mother who isn't quite divorced yet from her husband. Both of these make this movie sound boring.
There is a lot there. I'm going to go on to IMDb first. You realize if you got rid of the college-age son and he's just dating an older, or even just dating a woman with 2 small children and the ex-husband, that could also be a comedy. Isn't that been a bunch of comedies where the husband wants to come back to her and she's with this other guy, like, I don't know, Mrs. Doubtfire or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that whole premise could go either way. The Amazon one, the follows are a typical family. What?
What? How many typical families have a doctor in them?
Exactly. That's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
This has always driven me crazy. When I was a kid, there was a documentary about this family that had 2 homes, count them 2, in California somewhere. I forget what the documentary is about, but it's really, they call them the typical American family. Typical American families don't have 2 fucking houses.
Typical American families don't have 1 house.
It's like, why do they say things like this? What typical family lives like this? And you're right. Who is it? First of all, a typical family not only doesn't have a father as a doctor, they also don't have a son in college. Most people, sons or daughters, don't go to college.
Mm-hmm. And neither of these give you any clue as to what the actual conflicts are in this film.
No, not really. Although we understand the ex-husband is unwelcome, so.
Yeah, we know that there's a tension there, but whoa, does it go other places?
Although he's not an ex-husband, so that's actually incorrect as well.
Yeah. He's an ex-husband the same way I currently am an ex-husband. I'll mention that later. So, characters. Right here, we're going to talk about the 2 families, and then we'll pepper in some characters later. The Fowlers. Matt Fowler. He's a doctor, father, and husband. I could maybe say more, but the characters in this don't have much in terms of personality. Played by Tom Wilkinson.
The last time I went out and saw a Tom Wilkinson picture was in 2014 when I saw Selma. Before that, I saw this man in Prime Suspect, In the Name of the Father, The Full Monty, Rush Hour, Shakespeare in Love, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Batman Begins, Michael Clayton, The Green Hornet, and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
And I'd seen some of those and also seen him in The Patriot.
This man has worked a lot.
Yep.
And works a lot. He's still alive. I shouldn't put it in past tense.
Then we have Ruth Fowler, homemaker, wife, mother, choir director. Played by Sissy Spacek.
The absolutely first movie I saw Sissy Spacek in was a Stephen King horror film called Carrie. Frightened the fuck out of me. Have you ever heard of Carrie?
I have heard of Carrie.
But you've never seen it?
I have never seen it.
Oh, we got to correct that.
That's where I just say scribble, scribble, scribble.
Thanks to IMDb, I am reminded that she played the mother in the TV show Bloodline. Back to her film work, I also know her from JFK and Badlands. She won an Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter, but I never saw that.
Then we have Frank Fowler, son, boyfriend, and college student home on break. Played by Nick Stahl.
For this podcast, we last saw Nick Stahl in that awful feature, Sin City, for episode 129. Do you know who he played?
He was the fucking guy that looked like Lobo from DC Comics.
Yellow Bastard is his character's name.
Oh, no, never mind.
Oh, you're thinking of someone else.
Yep, I was thinking of the other guy. The guy played by the guy with the old-timey sounding name.
Yeah, we'll figure that out later. Let's move on.
Then we have the Strouts. Natalie Strout, non-ex-enough wife, girlfriend, cougar, and mother of 2. Played by Marissa Tomei.
I last saw her as a very hot Aunt May in Spider-Man No Way Home. I also saw her in Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man Homecoming, Captain America Civil War, and Avengers Endgame. Outside of the Marvel Universe, I've seen her in Trainwreck, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. To my surprise, she was in 22 episodes of a TV show, A Different World, that I watched as a kid, but I don't remember her at all. And finally, for this podcast, we last saw her in What Women Want for episode 42.
And who could forget her in, as we mentioned, My Cousin Vinny. Then we have Richard Strout, not ex-enough husband, father, and asshole. Played by William Mapother.
He was in Mission Impossible 2. I saw that.
And I haven't seen him in shit. And we have Jason Strout, a small child who thinks his younger brother doesn't understand women. Played by Camden Munson.
Like most child actors, he would appear to have stopped acting. This is the only thing I know him from.
And finally, Duncan Strout, smaller child that doesn't want to go fishing. Played by Christopher Adams.
Another kid who didn't continue acting, I guess. I didn't see anything else for him outside this picture.
So, we open to Frank Fowler and Natalie Strout frolicking in a field somewhere in Maine. We don't know who or where they are yet. All we see are a couple falling in the grass, doing their level best to catch Lyme disease.
Yeah, they're trying to do something, but Lyme disease isn't what was on their minds.
Then, in the early morning hours of some day, Frank and his father, Dr. Matt Fowler, show up at Natalie's house in the kind of small town that Stephen King likes to set things in.
He is from Maine.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what it is about small towns that lend themselves to horror, thriller, and suspense films. I guess it's the presumed sense of safety that comes with knowing your neighbors and all the streets in your town. This is a fishing town. Matt and Frank are there to pick up Jason Strout, Natalie's oldest, for a lobstering trip. Duncan Strout, her youngest, doesn't want to go. Frank and Natalie share a goodbye kiss, and nothing about the scene seems out of place.
And nor should it.
Then the opening credits are shown over a montage of what happens inside the local Strout fishery, where fish are unloaded, processed, and packaged.
It must stink like high hell in there.
Nope. Again, Joe, fresh fish don't smell bad. On the boat, Matt teaches Jason and the audience about lobsters without making it a metaphor for masculinity. One lobster lost a claw because there was more than one lobster in the bedroom, the part of the trap where the bait sits. Lobsters don't get along in captivity. Also, that libertarian paradise of Maine protects lobsters carrying eggs, and they throw one of those back.
What's with the libertarian paradise reference?
Have you ever heard the story about the town where people were getting eaten by bears?
No.
Oh, I got a citation needed episode for you to listen to.
Okay.
The next 5 scene titles cover a barbecue birthday party for Duncan, and we meet Willis Grinnell. Here at the barbecue, he's perving on Natalie to Matt, a behavior that doesn't make sense at all from what we see of him for the rest of the film. And the rest of it, he's a good friend. You know the type who will help you hide a body. Played by William Wise.
Don't know his work.
Me neither.
Would you hide a body from me, George?
Absolutely, Joe.
Okay. I would confess on your behalf.
I figured as much.
I would turn evidence so fast. I can't do prison, man.
Natalie offers to help Ruth Fowler in the kitchen, resulting in her picking up a bowl, confirming that it's the correct bowl, and then placing it down closer to Ruth. Before she's pulled away by Duncan wanting to swing on the swing set installed just for this party. We learn in that conversation that Ruth did her thesis on Eastern European folk music.
What does Eastern European folk music sound like?
Very hymny.
Oh, we actually hear it. That's right. It's in the music. Yeah, that's the type of music you would play in a horror movie. This is why in small towns they like horror films. Or actually cinema, because that music sounds like it's in a horror film.
Matt joins Ruth in the kitchen to begin the argument they'll be having for the first third of the movie. The blurbs have set this up for us already. Natalie is not divorced. They reference the laws in Maine, and while I'm not a lawyer, I think it's the same as it is here in New Jersey in that there is no legal status of separated. You're married or you're not. My ex and I are still married, separated only by distance and desire. Same with Natalie and her husband. Matt is happy for Frank and Natalie, and is relatively supportive of their relationship. Ruth is the opposite, focusing on how Natalie is a filthy adulteress, not worth her son's affections, and a distraction from his studies. Not in so many words, but it is those sentiments. Ruth glances out the window and with a "oh great," sees Natalie's not quite divorced husband, Richard Strout. His father owns the Strout fishery and canning factory that employs probably half the town. Could this guy look any more like a creep?
Yeah, that mustache does him no favors.
Nope. It's like Goose's mustache from Top Gun got mad. Richard isn't supposed to be here, and that will be a theme. He was supposed to meet Natalie at her place to see the kids. Frank tries to keep the peace, offering barbecue grub, and Richard declines because of fucking course he does. Oh, and Richard's admonition to his oldest not to shove his youngest will be hypocritical before long.
Do you think this could have been different if Frank and Richard and Natalie were all swingers?
Yes, I think if Richard had the mental capability and kind of compassion and compersion, as it's known, to be okay watching somebody else or participating with somebody else and his wife, the jealousy and possessiveness that causes the conflict in this wouldn't exist. Basically, this movie wouldn't happen.
Oh, it'd be a whole other movie. Then In the Bedroom really would mean something.
Yep. That night, Ruth and Matt continue their disagreement, and Matt makes a dick joke.
Well, he needs his head in school, not in her.
So to speak. Ow.
Really tortured dick joke. He needs his head in school, not in her? Come the fuck on.
Also, it's summer. She's not taking him away from studies. He's not studying anything.
Mm-hmm. The next day, we head to Dr. Fowler's office, where we see his patients in the waiting room. Alma Adamson and Elwyn Adamson. Alma is worried about Elwyn's issues with gravity and memory. They're played by Harriet Dawkins and Bill Dawkins.
I know them from nothing.
And I only included them because I found it interesting that they are a couple playing a couple. Matt ducks out of work to go have lunch with Frank down on the docks, but Frank's not there because he's got an interview today. Frank isn't at that interview, though. He's at home banging Natalie. Matt comes home and discovers this, and those three then have an awkward, quiet lunch. Then there's a Little League game, where there's only two things to note. Number one, Matt and Ruth need to be reminded to wave to a waving child. And number two, Frank tries to disarm his mom's opposition by telling her that his relationship with Natalie isn't serious. He is lying so hard. Natalie comes home and finds Richard is broken in and is sitting at the table eating a sandwich, claiming he only came to drop off a trophy for Jason before angling to move back in so that they can be one big happy family again.
You don't change, do you?
Change? No. No, I don't change. Everything around me changes. You change. You take my house, and you take my kids, and you fuck this other guy. But me, I don't change at all.
Right here, my notes say, this guy is going to kill somebody. Then he does that lunge fake thing that Virgil did in Tu Wong Fu, the thing that's legally an assault, but nobody ever calls out as such.
Yep.
Later at night, in the backyard, Natalie is smoking while Frank plays with blocks.
Well, he's building something. He's an architecture student.
They discuss their age difference and architecture. Frank is thinking about waiting a year to return to school because, this isn't serious or anything. Then Frank notices an Action Man figure, oversized gun and everything, that Richard gave to Duncan for his birthday. My notes called this foreshadowing. Then somebody pulls up and we get a scene change to Ruth, teaching her music class, her choir practicing some Balkan folk songs. And Ruth comes home from that to find her doctor husband stitching their son's eye because Richard came by and pummeled the shit out of him. Ruth is correct that they should have called the police. I mean, everyone here is white. Then she turns that into a you need to break up, which is not going to do anything about the real problem of the psychopath being a psychopath.
It seems to me the town doctor would have some standing. If you're going around smacking his kid, that would have consequences for you regardless. I mean, I know Richard's family is wealthy, and I guess you're probably right. Maybe half the town works for his company or his father's company, although he doesn't get to work for it. So obviously he's a real fuck up there. It's just weird that nobody like, you know what? I have standing here. I'm going to call the cops. There's just like, no, we can't call them.
In the next scene, we meet another friend of the family, Henry. He's an old fisherman whose second-hand lobstering boat is used by Frank, played by Frank T. Wells.
The only other thing I saw him in was Amistad.
And I only included him because I confused him with Harry Dean Stanton.
Oh, wow, okay.
The conversation is mostly kids these days.
What's the matter with kids these days? Dun, 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 dun. Kids, they're bad in every way. That's a Broadway song.
Matt comes to talk while Frank is washing the boat. Frank's been avoiding home, not wanting to deal with his mom's pressure to end things with Natalie. Frank talks about not going back to school to make it as a fisherman. Then, during a poker game, we meet Carl, the last of the Fowler friends that we'll see. He is played by W. Clapham Murray.
I got nothing.
I only included him because he gave us half of the sound clips in this episode.
You can't hypnotize the cars into changing, Matt.
For Christ's sake, better, Carl's gonna start.
The beggar's dog and the widow's cat. Feed them and thou wilt grow fat. The gnat sings his summer's song. Poison gets from slander's tongue. The poison of the snake and newt is the sweat of envy's foot. The poison of the honeybee is the artist's jealousy.
All right, Carl. $2. Tell you, man, you gotta get out of this Blake thing. You're in a rut.
Oh, don't get him started, man.
Well, whenever I do my own stuff, you guys bitch and moan.
Oh, that's not true. We love your stuff. It's great stuff, right?
Carl is like the most unique and enjoyable character in this film.
Okay.
He's got that voice and that cadence to it, when he's not quoting poetry. When I do my own stuff, you guys bitch and moan. It's very nice. I like it. Frank wins a bunch of money at the game and then goes home to sketch some stuff. Ruth finds him sharpening pencils with a knife and is expecting him to have broken up with Natalie. He says he did, and he may have, but Ruth also thinks this is a good time to be all, I know you cared about her, which is like consoling a child after you shoot their puppy.
Oh, I think that's a bit of an extreme example.
The next day, we see him on the phone with somebody architecture-y, so sure, he may have actually broken up with Natalie. That call gets interrupted by a call from Jason saying something bad happened at home, because somehow Jason has his phone number memorized.
They seem to be rather close, so that's not unbelievable.
So, of course, Frank rushes over to find that Richard had been there and pushed Natalie, which resulted in the entire living room looking like a tornado hit it. And no, she doesn't want to call the police. And before they can hem and haw over that for too long, Richard comes back. Frank tells Natalie to go hide upstairs and tells Frank he's calling the police. Doesn't call the police, but says he's gonna. That's a step in the right direction. Frank pretends to leave and then smugly walks around the house past a bunch of windows that Frank can see out of and gets into the back door before Frank can get there. Upstairs, Natalie has to convince children to not go into danger as she listens to an escalating fight downstairs. When she can finally get to the staircase, she hears a gunshot. She finds Richard sitting at the kitchen table, and Frank dead on the floor with his head blown open. And this is only 40 minutes into the movie, and marks the end of what is clearly the first act.
What clued you in on that?
How do you continue with that energy of the story without that character now? Because he's dead.
That was a joke, George.
Oh.
Yes, I understand. Obviously, that was the first act. A very slow beginning, and they seem like, what's going on here? Oh, there's a little thing between the couples. All right, nothing's really happening here. Then suddenly, bang!
Bang! We see Matt get a call from Natalie, and then see Matt at Ruth's choir rehearsal, but we don't see either of them actually react to the receipt of the news. At the funeral, Natalie hangs back and doesn't attend the post-funeral party. Why do we throw parties after funerals? Does anyone really want to be there? Does anyone ever look back on those and think this was a really good healing time? The last one I went to certainly didn't make any great memories for me. I mean, I got to meet some of the last cousins that I hadn't met yet, and that was cool. But other than that, I got confirmation that my mother's side of the family are terrorists and maggots, and realized that I never want to see them again.
Jesus Christ. Wow, I got nothing there. I'm not even going to comment on that.
My uncle said, 35% of millennials identify as socialist? Well, I'll kill 35% of millennials just to show them what socialism does.
What does that even mean?
I don't know, but that's terrorism. That's a terroristic threat.
Oi.
Hadn't seen that uncle in 30 years, and that's what I hear come out of his mouth right after my mom's funeral. Act 2 is about Ruth and Matt coping with Frank's murder. Examples of their behavior are looking at Frank's belongings longingly, being unable to sleep, and getting snippy and passive-aggressive with each other.
Which, you know, when your child dies, that's actually pretty normal behavior. People start turning on each other, especially if it's something horrible happened that neither one had any power to stop.
Well, yeah, Joe, they are a typical family.
Well, in that case, this is typical.
Yeah. Willis takes Matt out for breakfast and asks a bunch of questions that he doesn't need to know the answers to that keep Matt's head focused on someone killed my son. Then he offers for Matt and Ruth to come hang out at his cabin in the woods on an upcoming weekend. First, we need to have the combination bail and probable cause hearing, where Natalie will be legally gaslit by defense attorney Marla Keyes, played by Karen Allen.
We last saw her in Malcolm X, episode 116.
And she was Marion in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Do you know if they're bringing her back for the new one?
No idea.
Okay.
The legal gaslighting boils down to whether or not one can witness a crime with a sense other than one's eyes. I'd argue that yes, you can, or else there never would have been a blind person called as a witness ever. But the movie doesn't stop to consider that. This ends up pushing the criminal trial out from a few months to more than a year away. This development isn't helping the Fowlers with their grief processing. Then reporters descend upon their property, being all nosy and inconsiderate until Ruth pressures her husband to not ask, but tell them to screw off.
We actually both know someone whose child was murdered. You know someone who was married to someone whose child was murdered. And that case took forever. And this person was in jail that time, but it took forever for them to finally get him convicted. And he had no money. So this is, unfortunately, the way the criminal justice system works. Just very slow.
Mm-hmm. Saturday morning, Ruth is reading newspaper articles about how Richard made bail. Matt says he has something to do at the office and that it won't take long. That is a lie. What he does is go see Natalie, where she's working as a convenience store clerk. They have an awkward conversation that had me wondering if the next conflict in this 2+ hour movie was going to be an affair. It's mostly a closure-getting moment for Matt.
You really thought there was like something sexual about that scene?
I didn't know where the fuck the movie was going. And Marissa Tomei has those eyes. Now the Fowlers join Willis and his wife up at their cabin. His wife, Katie, sells Mary Kay products and is played by Celia Weston.
I first saw her on the TV show Alice. She replaced a character who got spun off into her own series. She was in Observe and Report, a movie I had forgotten even existed. She was also in Flirting with Disaster. She was in Dead Man Walking. I could have sworn she was in Roseanne, but IMDb doesn't think so.
And I haven't seen her in anything. And that is the last of the characters that we will be introducing.
Okay.
The women look at a photo album of the Grinnell's grandchildren. Katie trips up and mentions kids dying, which sets Ruth's waterworks flowing. Then we get a bit of backstory about why the Fowlers only had one kid. Something about Matt's career and them putting all their eggs in one basket. We are briefly made aware that Katie takes a sleeping pill at night because it will be mentioned later, and almost everything in this movie is foreshadowed at least once before it happens. On the way back, Ruth falls asleep in the car so that we get a foreshadowing of the fact that there is a manually operated drawbridge in town. I was expecting a Strout boat to pass by and for her to see it and get all sad, but nope. Nothing as meaningful as that. Ruth goes to visit Frank's grave. A priest had been watching Ruth at the gravestone through a window and intervenes with her before she can leave. I'm not a fan of clergy acting like therapists or counselors, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. So from him, some other woman had a vision after they lost a child that basically says just keep walking. And that's so useless I wanted her to slap him.
Oh, that's who you wanted her to slap. She slapped someone else, though.
Yeah, well, she doesn't because culture, but she should have put her cigarette out right in his eye. The woman with the vision found comfort in that after her child died in a swimming accident. Sure, priest, all kids who die are the same, and the grief is all the same. Accidental drowning, bullet to the brain, same difference to the mother, right?
It really should behoove anyone who is a minister, priest, whatever, all that highfalutin stuff, to have some sort of counseling degree.
No.
Because that really is their job.
I mean, yes, it should. The thing is, they get all of the respect afforded to people who do that with none of the expertise.
Without a doubt.
Poker night again, because of course it was foreshadowed the first time. Nobody is talking, everyone's afraid to, so Carl pipes up with another poem and the game can move on. And most of what's left of Act 2 involves Ruth having run-ins with a free Richard in town, and Matt trying to find a way to get the justice system to move faster. Oh, and Natalie goes to Ruth to express her condolences and gets slapped for her the trouble. They shot that slap 15 times, and the one we see was the first one filmed. So Sissy Spacek slapped Marissa Tomei 14 more times than was necessary.
Well, you never know what take is the good one.
The climax of this act is a massive argument between Matt and Ruth, where they each blame each other for whatever part of Frank's personality that led to him getting killed. Ruth also yells that she, too, thought the conflict in the second act would be an affair between Matt and Natalie. This is interrupted by a child selling chocolate for a gymnastics fundraiser, which gives Matt a chance to cool his tits before going back and apologizing for his part, as Ruth breaks down and apologizes for her part. What comes out of this is that the largest component of Ruth's continued trauma is her inability to go into town without running into her son's murderer.
Bro, he had enough money. He really should have just left town. He could come back for the trial.
Well, Joe. The final act involves Willis hearing that Richard is bartending in another town where nobody knows who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Matt finds this bar, and after closing, and after we are assured that Richard is every bit a creepy, worthless sleazebag, kidnaps him at gunpoint. Forcing Richard to drive home, Matt tells him that he's arranged for Richard to skip bail, and that he just can't have Ruth running into him anymore.
As a general rule, and I don't know what the experts say on this, but if someone's got you at gunpoint and they want you to go somewhere, my feeling is, don't go. Because chances are they just want to get you alone somewhere to be able to do what they want to do. If they really want that, then that's probably best to say no. Although I understand why you wouldn't, because you're afraid of getting shot. But at least intellectually, my idea is like, no, I'm not driving anywhere with you. So you get me alone to shoot me, forget it.
Good advice, Joe. Richard is compliant, though he manages to say things that he hopes would be exculpatory that he should just have not said. Like trying to justify it, like, he was banging my wife. Okay, so the fuck what? Asshole. At one point, Matt is watching Richard take a piss and notices a large framed photo of Richard and Natalie on the wall from a time when Natalie was happy with him. I wanted so badly for Matt to put a bullet through Richard's head, letting his corpse fall face forward into a bowl of his own urine. Matt's not that kind of guy, so that doesn't happen. Snicker, snicker. As they leave the apartment, Matt leaves an Amtrak ticket folder on a counter. Then Matt directs Richard to drive until they reach Willis's place in the woods. He's told that he's going to stay with Cliff for a few days before going to the airport. Then, almost out of nowhere, Matt shoots Richard. I laughed so hard at that.
Oh, Jesus.
And I laughed even harder when, as Richard is trying to crawl away, Matt puts another few rounds into the asshole's back. Willis chides Matt, not for killing Richard. No, not that. That was the plan all along. The chiding is for doing it in the driveway instead of out in the woods. And the chiding is deserved because the extra time it takes to drag the corpse out there means they get stuck in a rainstorm while digging the grave, which you'd have thought they'd have done before tonight, but whatever. It's the kind of movie storm where there's one clap of thunder before the rain falls and then no further thunder or lightning, just rain.
Mm-hmm.
And a deer spots them, and I wanted one of them to shoot the deer for being a witness. On their drive back into town, the delay also means they get stuck at the drawbridge because the early morning fishers are heading out. The guy that operates the bridge might have taken notice that Matt Fowler was driving Richard Stout's truck, but we learned through conversation that the guy is pretty drunk most of the time, so whatever. Willis also expresses concern that Katie's sleeping pill would be wearing off soon. I'm glad we had her yelling down the stairs for him to bring her one earlier in the film, or we may not have understood what that meant.
Huh.
When Matt gets home, he strips to his boxers and washes his murder outfit, then heads to bed. Ruth is up and asks if he did it, so we know she was in on it. He doesn't answer. He just lays down, mumbles something about the picture he saw in the hallway. Then Ruth gets up to start the day, trying to take care of Matt's needs that he's not expressing or his. The end.
Indeed. All right. George, does this still work?
Yeah, why the fuck not? It's whatever. It's a 3-act murder movie. Okay? That, like, I find there's nothing particularly objectionable in it. There's nothing even really unbelievable in it either. I don't find the characters all that compelling, but, you know, people aren't always compelling either. I don't know what I can't. The only thing I really find fault with this is it's so fucking white. Like, there is not a person darker than me anywhere to be seen in any shot.
Well, it is Maine. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say this doesn't work because, I mean, nothing in it is particularly objectionable. There's nothing dated about it. We still have fishy villages. We still have people, you know, with guns. We still have, you know, there's nothing in the film that couldn't happen today. I mean, you can redo this picture and not change much.
Although, if you do this picture, change much. Please.
What would you change?
I'd make it shorter. This did not need 2 hours.
No, I agree. I think they just wanted to raise the tension by making it just like, oh, what's going on? Nothing's happening. I presume.
Yeah, that's a really lazy and obnoxious way to raise tension.
Yeah, it still works. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There's not really much more you can say. The characters are fine. I think the acting's fantastic, but you're right. On the page, there really isn't much to these characters. Although we do learn something about them, but and what we learn isn't that interesting. But then,
no, we learn like one fact per character. Like they had a quota sheet.
I mean, I guess it is a bit strange that with all their friends, he seems to be the one who really has friends. His wife doesn't, and they have no kids. Frank's age that he would be hanging out with, who's still in town. I understand some of the kids are out of town, but some would still be there. But whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it's fine. I got nothing. I got nothing to say about this picture. It's like, all right, whatever.
Yep.
It's not bad. It's not,
it's not interesting enough to not work anymore.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know. In the bedroom, I can think of better things that happen there. All right?
Mm-hmm.
George, what's up next?
Our next episode won't be next week, as this month is one of those 5-week months where we don't publish one on the last week. The next episode will be the first to drop in the new year, 2023, on Wednesday, January 4th for the general public and Tuesday, January 3rd for patrons, and we will be talking about Blade Runner from 1982.
That's right, folks. We have not seen Blade Runner yet. For all those who seem to keep thinking we've seen films we haven't seen yet. Anyway, so that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romaka. Thanks for listening indeed. Because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
There are things of which I may not speak. There are dreams that cannot die. There are thoughts that make the strong heart weak and bring a pallor into the cheek and a mist before the eye. And the words of that fatal song come over me like a chill. A boy's will is the wind's will, and the thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Well, she just she suggests
it's a joke, Joe. It's me making a joke.
I know.
Okay, go ahead and explain the joke.
All right, fine. Skip it.
No, you can explain it.
No, it's fine. Go on.
Okay.
George, why did you take up smoking? What did you like about it, and why did you quit?
What book has impacted you the most?
All right, George, have you ever ridden a horse?
When was the moment in your life where you laughed the hardest?
George, what is more important, love or money, and why?